Namaste and welcome to the 1 minute. I've just been told that I don't have the right chashma. Oh. Okay, namaste once again and welcome to this Wednesday 10 p.m. show, mostly on international affairs. And today again we have two international experts. As usual, Shri Vibhuti Jha and our expert on imperialism and all its nuances, Ruchir Sharma. I'll start with Ruchir. Ruchir, what kind of agent of imperialism is this Indian Medical Association?
Well, the Indian Medical Association, as a interest group, is essentially a lobbyist group. And all interest groups and lobbyist groups have their own self-interest, are motivated by their self-interest, and seek to influence the government, popular perceptions, the media, towards a certain course of action, towards a certain set of outcomes and policies that are favorable to them. And it's best with all of these lobbyist groups, with all of these special interest groups, that we have our eyes open and understand fundamentally it's about self-interest.
Okay, Vibhuti Ji, on that note, do you find it...
Quick response from, sorry. That was a very short...
You were muted, so yeah. I'll get my question in.
I'm unmuted.
I'll get my question in, so you can answer both together.
Oh, yes, sure.
So, I think almost all of us know that IMA is a interest group, a lobbyist, and mostly on behalf of the Western pharma. And they do some curious things like endorsing products. They have endorsed Asian paints in the past. They have endorsed Odomos. They have endorsed close-up toothpaste. Can you imagine? Indian Medical Association endorsing close-up toothpaste. And they, of course, they also endorsed that Hema Malini endorsed Kent Aro. And I had a long list. I've forgotten. I remember only 4. And you find it strange that this particular interest group demands all kind of action against Baba Ramdev, who has a research laboratory, 400 crores invested in that research laboratory, thousands of research papers. And this IMA doesn't have a single one. And they accuse him of sedition, and the Honorable Health Minister of India promptly writes a letter on behalf of, or rather, egged on by the IMA. I think that is what the vaccine imperialism, or call it imperialism, classic imperialism, is like. They are able to dictate the behavior of the client states. And India seems to be acting like a client state these days. What do you say?
Well, I've said this before, and I will say it again. India is a happy hunting ground for all hunters. And we have allowed it to happen. We have allowed it to happen because we are not standing firm. And the Western countries, if you look at it this way, they have created these structures. Give them credit for that. I mean, it's time for us to learn from it. Is that they created the structures, they superimposed their structures on us. And I remember when I was a kid going to the doctor's office, medical representatives used to come with a bag. What was that? Inducement to use the product of a particular company. And this goes on globally. There is a very beautiful structure created for that. And they are all part of the same money-making venture. So, you catch on to the people, like, for example, when you catch on to somebody to induce them, that's what religious imperialism is all about, right? We can use that part of it as well. That is inducement. Like Esther mentioned in our conversation last time, they come and give the impression of taking care of things. But this part This is something which is very interesting. It really kind of got me angry. You are accusing Baba Ramdev of sedition. On the contrary, you should be tried for sedition, working against India's interests. That is the issue that Indians need to pick up and run the relay race. I am so annoyed with that particular thing that I know private sector capitalism is for profit. It's not a charitable organization. So when you talk about morality to a profit-making entity, that again is a pitching the wrong argument to those guys. But the argument is about the market, the opportunity. And we, even as a buyer, as a consumer, we are not dictating the terms. That's something wrong with us. And that's what I'm trying to say is that you cannot have this kind of a scenario. I mean, this imperialistic practices shift. In the year 2000, it was IT imperialism, so to say, Y2K, the whole world was going to collapse. I remember as a banker, telling people that your year-end statements are safe. Don't worry. Even if the computers crash, your year-end statement would be there with you on your computer to know what your balance was. You think the bankers didn't know about this problem? We knew about this problem much ahead of time. We already had fixed it. This was just the ballyhoo that goes on from time to time to create this superstructure of something. Like nowadays it is climate change. But nobody talks about the reality of the situation, how the capitalist enterprises, how the Western people create the narrative of imperialism from one to another. It was East India Company then, it is multinational corporations now. There is no difference. I mean, I'm talking about, say, for example, Twitter, WhatsApp, and Facebook. Hey, these are not consumer items. We won't die if it freezes tomorrow and these companies go bankrupt and belly up. I'm 100% sure something else will come. I'm talking about the fact that we know this now. The imperialism of pharma industry has come about. It's about data theft. Is the most sacrosanct information is our data about our health. That is the most sacrosanct private thing in our lives, right? If that data is stolen, if that data is aware, then they can customize. We already have gene therapy in the world around, right? We already know that you can create custom children nowadays. We also know that Wuhan virus was custom made for testing. We know that now. I mean, one doesn't have to be a James Bond or a secret agent to find that. It is established. It was experimented on human mice. I did not know about that term. It was perfected on a human mice. And this virus doesn't exist in the atmosphere. There are traces of SARS-1 and MERS viruses in the air. SARS-2 Wuhan virus doesn't have any trace left anywhere. And think about it. It sets me thinking about it, that it came first, elderly people with diabetes, obesity, they were all affected by that. Take care of them. Then it gradually came down to 40, 50 age people of 40, 50 age group. Then it came down to children now. Pfizer announced that their CDC approved their children Medicaid vaccine on, I think, April 14th or something like that. And next day onwards, children are now available to be taken up. I'm looking at it from this point of view that we are now looking at the worst of capitalism in play. The profit motive has far, far outlived its utility because it's at the expense of people. That's what is the sad part of it. The finest system, democracy, the worst of the systems available to us, but this is the best system. Democracy is being abused left, right, and center, hit at the center. Likewise, capitalism is the best system. It allows innovation, leadership, entrepreneurship to grow, but the profit is the motive that gets, is the weakest point. To what extent, what profit is adequate and not adequate? Who decides on that? So I'm disappointed with Indian doctors. I was told by one doctor here in Long Island here, he was on a video call with a couple of Indian doctors and he said, they are prescribing all wrong prescriptions. He was on the show with me. And he said that, how can you have, and I'm asking this question of IMA. People talk about Ayurveda and all this stuff as no scientific basis. I said, breathing in and breathing out, what scientific evidence do you need about that? Right? You breathe in oxygen, you exhale carbon dioxide. What scientific evidence, data you want that it does good to your body? But Maharishi Mahesh Yogi subjected and allowed US Department of Health to put the entire meditation practice to scientific evaluation, that it reduces stress, it reduces cholesterol, it reduces blood pressure, and thus your stroke and heart conditions become better. That's how meditation became a global phenomenon and accepted in America. So I think I will stop here now, but you can see my frustration. I'm not a happy guy about that.
To add
Okay.
something quickly to that, if I may.
Yes, please.
Many political philosophers believe that you can either have pure democracy or you can have pure capitalism. The two will always compete with each other, because in the kind of democracies that we have today, it's a free-for-all. That lobbyists basically can dictate policy based on them being able to mobilize funding, being able to have the ear of the ministry. And even in the classic BBC comedy or parody, Yes Minister, Yes Minister, Yes Prime Minister, they used to say that the bureaucrats who are embedded in the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Industry have a deeper and longer term relationship with their counterparts in the healthcare industry or with industrialists than they do with their political masters. So it's that
Absolutely.
explains the quickness with which the health minister acted upon this.
You're quite right. Actually, I have some experience in the health sector. I was actually principal secretary of Ayurveda for some time. And I have seen these things happen. So I know, in fact, a lot of these machinations going back and forth. But when we're talking about, actually, the topic was vaccine imperialism. But looks like because of the developments that happened today, we would probably be discussing pharma imperialism as a broader kind of a subject. And Ruchir, for you, I have something which I'll read out because I got it only just now. And I got it because Professor Subhash Kak, he tweeted this article. And this article is actually from PLOS Medicine. John Ionitz, who is a researcher, scientific researcher. And he has this paper. It is titled, interestingly, Why Most Published Research Findings Are False. And then, in fact, if you just a little subpara, I'll read this out, and that's about sums up the entire hoax of the pharma industry, the world. So what does he say? He says that several methodologists have pointed out that the high rate of non-replication of the research discoveries is a consequence of the convenient yet ill-founded strategy of claiming conclusive research findings solely on the basis of a single study assessed by formal statistical significance, typically for a p-value less than 0.05. And then he concludes that this happens due to positive bias. How true is that for the pharma industry as a whole, and what we find in this vaccine imperialism? As I think I kind of put this title a bit glibly, but this seems to be more akin to the pharma imperialism as a whole.
Well, unfortunately, the academic and research ecosystem around the world is regarded by many people to be broken. That the structures in place, the incentives in place and disincentives, for what is good research and what is encouraged to be published, or most importantly, where do you get funding? Which research gets funding and which doesn't, is again symptomatic and emblematic of this wider phenomenon that we've seen of uh, money, of lobbying, invading spaces that should belong to the public. That politics belongs to the public, or healthcare belongs to the public, or knowledge creation should belong to the public, but instead it's increasingly common that researchers and university departments rely on external funding for their research, and much of this external funding is channeled through lobbyists or from companies themselves. The tobacco industry, the oil and gas industry, the beef lobby, they've all been seen to be seeding researchers and seeding research that is designed to create certain predetermined conclusions and create doubt and confusion in the minds of the greater public. The greater public is not going to read the actual research. They'll get a distilled version by some friendly media outlet, which will say, oh, in ancient times, everyone ate beef in India. Yeah, and if you actually read the paper, you'll see that it says the opposite sometimes, or that it's just one line that's blown out of proportion. So that's in humanities. In science, for years you had the oil and gas lobbies. You had certain countries as well that are dependent on hydrocarbon economy, on the hydrocarbon economy, seeding research that said, oh, it's fine, we can happily burn oil for the next 9 decades and it won't have any problems for anyone. This is growing more and more common, unfortunately. And because states are not investing in research, states are not investing in academia, that gap, that vacuum is filled up by private funding. And private funding always has strings attached. It always has an agenda. They, like Vibhuti Ji said, it's not charity. There's a profit motive. So they give money in the expectation of certain services to be returned.
Absolutely. And we see this in the vaccine diplomacy that is being practiced by the United States of America now. They are being dictated by the pharma lobbies. So I think the entire world seems to be acting at the behest of Pfizer, for instance. And they are getting their way, and they have their order book full, and they can kind of play around with the world. Even the difficulty is that there is a wannabe leader of the world order, that is China, which doesn't have a vaccine that is worth anything at all. So they seem to be losing out in their quest for rebuilding the new world order because of this. And that actually, that brings you to this whole situation. Who benefits? Everybody says that China benefits. I don't see China benefiting from all this. It seems to be the United States and the private pharma lobbies that seem to be benefiting out of this.
Yes. Who benefits from it? Who benefited from Wuhan virus? Who created the ruckus? Who lost out? Who was the beneficiary of the whole thing? That is the root, the question that we must understand. And you are totally right. Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna, the maximum amount of vaccines supplied is to the rich countries. On a per capita basis, 42 out of 100 is in rich countries, 25 to South America, Europe, and things like that. Asian countries have little. Africa has 1.1. So the question is, who can pay? People here can pay. That's why they pay $10 per pill for Viagra. That's what they paid in the beginning stages. The question was it worth it? For some it was, some it was not. So the question is, the amount of research you paid is actually determined by what is available to you. So that's what is important. But important part here is that the patent part of it, the things that I'm observing, which makes me angry, and is the fact that when the question of removing the patent restrictions or providing freedom was talked about, guess the countries that objected to it the most? It was Europeans. Biden eventually came around after lecturing on WTO and all that stuff. Biden came around to say, okay, I'm okay with releasing this. But it was Merkel who said, we made India a pharma hub of the world. We made.
No, we allowed. We
allowed. It's even worse. Thank you for reminding me of that.
That's called hubris.
Yes. European countries are, and she is record on saying that if patent waiver, it will create complications for future production, which means future profit. But here is the thing that I'm talking about now, is that the consumer drives the thing. You know why consumer is king? Because the fool pays for everything. That's why consumer is called a king in the marketing language. Why the customer is king? Consumer is king because the buffoon pays for it through his nose or from wherever. That's the part, the consumer power has to be exercised by a 1.3 billion market for everything. Instead of saying, come one, come all, allow them to play the game, you start playing the game. Start asserting yourself that if you are coming here, these are our terms and conditions. You may have a plethora of benefits in your own country where 90% of the economy is in private sector. We are not. We have to manage our resources, manage the poor and the middle class who are dependent on the government. So this is the kind of thing which I have, I believe that India needs to set up these things, is that as an institutional building exercise, our distribution pattern, our requirement, and this will not happen, Sanjay ji, with due respect to your previous employers, the Indian Administrative Service. Sometimes I say it's the mistimed administrative service because the people have no commitment to that. That's the sad part. I left bureaucracy only because of one reason. That after competing in the exam, I began to realize that people begin to collect their pension check from day one. So,
actually, I disagree with you. They are greatly
please
committed.
do disagree with me. But what I'm
They are
saying,
committed. But to what? They are greatly committed to their careers.
What I'm saying is different. My point of view is that the Indian Administrative Service, they have enormous responsibility. They are not idiots. They are very smart guys. I have great respect for their intelligence, capacity to deal with situations. I'm saying apply it, because you can't be moved. You are there. So if anything in India suffers from implementation, is because the administrative service did not implement it properly, or they didn't have the wherewithal to do it, whatever the reason may be. It's not the intellect or wisdom I'm questioning. I'm saying that you must beef up that entire support system. So I'll give you an example, Sanjay ji. This will intrigue you. My cousin, who is an IS officer, is retired now. During Giuliani administration, a bunch of 8 IS officers came on a United Nations mission to study Giuliani's administrative practices that led to transformation of New York City. Bear it in mind. I got a call that, Bhaiya, I'm in town, want to meet you. Great. I had not met him for 20 years. You know where he was staying, where he was put up? They were put up in a YMCA, which was in such a dangerous area that when I went there, I had to pay $20 to the guy to take care of my car. I had to tell him, bro, it's brother's car. Don't ruin it. It was all a den of thieves, drug dealers, and prostitutes. That's where 8 young IS officers were staying. Now, the point which I'm trying to make here is, this is an actual incident. They were staying in a 2-room sharing, 2 people, common bathroom. This is in New York, Manhattan. I said, what the hell are you doing here? I said, who is the team leader? Oh, he's staying in another hotel in downtown Manhattan. I said, take me to him. I went to that officer. I said, you should be ashamed of yourself that you are risking the lives of 8 young men who could be killed, murdered, or return with a venereal disease if they become very active. What will you study about administrative system if you are yourself living in a messy condition? I'm saying it is not that they suffered from lack of wisdom. They didn't suffer from lack of capacity. They were bright guys. But eventually, when it comes to doing it, I would urge you, next book that you write, Sanjay ji, in Indian administrative service, things they did not teach me in Ivy school. Like I said to somebody, a young Indian guy, like a young Indian guy who was working for a major bank here, he told me, I don't want to work there. It's 9 to 5. It's not my cup of tea. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I would rather be a small guy, a big guy in a small pond. At least I know what I'm doing, right? So I said, do you want to learn business through an American guy, or you want to learn from Indian guy? So I said, what will I learn from the Indian company? He said, you will learn everything that you should not do to become successful. You will make money, but you will never be big and successful. He said, I want to know what I need not do. So I said, that's what I'm saying. So I would urge that. Here is something which is very close to my heart. Having lived here, came here to promote India, and I'm saying things India must do for itself, for its people. And, I'm seeing that possibility happen, but it will not happen if you are proposing to cast a sedition charge on a guy who is teaching you how to breathe. Come on.
Well, I think this guy, Lele, and this Jaipal, they understand a different kind of language. And if Baba Ramdev were to hire me, then I would give these guys back as good as they're giving to Baba Ramdev. But then I think Baba Ramdev is a very decent person. And he was debating with them yesterday on Aaj Tak. I don't know if you watched it. The guy from the IMA, the secretary who was there, absolutely hideous. I mean, I'm using a very strong term, I know, but that's what you use hideous for appearance, but even his mannerisms were hideous. His speech was hideous. Everything about him was hideous, absolutely. And he was representing a professional body. What is IMA? After all, it is just a society registered under the Societies Act of 1860. And it is supposed to represent their professional interest. It is not supposed to represent the interest of medical research. It is not supposed to represent the interest of medicine as a discipline. That's not their job. That's the job of either MCI or ICMR or other research institutes. It is their job. These guys are happily hijacking, and I think Ruchir would probably weigh in on this, that this is the classic imperialistic agent in the very beautiful ways in which Ruchir has defined imperialism.
Yes, so if we take a step back and look at what's happening around medicine and specifically, let's say, vaccines in the world today, I think you both mentioned how certain countries have great access to vaccines while others have been blocked, whether it's at the WTO, whether it's with raw materials being blocked. And similarly, this isn't an aberration. This happens every day of the year, in less glamorous pharmaceutical products. You have a stranglehold of certain countries, certain companies on the production, marketing, and distribution of pharmaceutical and medical products. And as you said very well, the IMA is simply a society that represents the professional interests of the medical community. So not patients, not the welfare of patients, And if one paid closer attention to the industry, a few years ago there was an infamous consulting report where a big pharmaceutical hired one of the big consulting firms, BCG, Bain, McKinsey. I won't say which one. And they asked the question: is it actually profitable to cure patients, or is it better to treat them for a longer period? Because if you cure them, then you only get paid, for a shorter amount of time. Whereas from a purely business point of view, it's more profitable to keep them unhealthy so that you can do a long-running therapy or treatment rather than a cure. And this is also where you have the clash between, let's say, the kind of doctors who believe in medicating their patients, who believe in prescribing invasive treatments or surgeries, as opposed to preventative medicine. Now, throughout the world, more and more countries are beginning to realize that the key is to prevent people from getting sick in the first place. Preventative medicine helps address a lot of the issues that today are normalized. So cardiovascular diseases, it's very difficult to cure them once they develop. The key is to prevent that from reaching epidemic levels. You shouldn't have an obesity epidemic in the first place. Now, in India, it hasn't been marketed in, with a sexy term like preventative medicine. It's called Ayurveda, and everything Indian is bad, according to certain lobbyists and certain neo-colonial agents and people with a old British mentality, nostalgists for the empire, for the British Raj. They can't accept that there's anything good about India, about our knowledge systems. How can they when they think that India only came into existence through Mountbatten in 1947? But if you tell them that in Cuba, life expectancy went up by 20 years because they adopted preventative medicine, or you tell them about a tiny island in Greece where everybody lives to 95, 100 years old, you say that, oh, it's the Mediterranean diet, this, and preventative medicine, that, then they'll say, oh, wow, why don't we do that here? Well, we did do that for thousands of years. This knowledge is not anything new, but you want the stamp of Western approval before you can accept it. And that's a sign of either bad faith engagement with the topic, or just a very colonized mind which is incapable of accepting that anything can come from the East, from outside of the West.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what we're watching. In fact, that are the wages of that happening all around. That's what we're watching.
Yes, and if you recall, one of the most infamous incidents about this East-West conflict or imperialism when it comes to pharmaceuticals was about 20 years ago, when certain US-based pharmaceutical companies refused to sell their HIV antiretroviral therapy drugs to countries in Southern Africa, so it's particularly South Africa, Botswana, which at the time were the hotspots of HIV/AIDS throughout the world. They said that, we can't sell it in Africa because A, it doesn't make us any money, and B, they claimed Africans don't know how to take medicine on time. And this became a huge issue. This was taken up by the government of South Africa, it was taken up by the government of India. It was taken up by activists, people who were dying of HIV/AIDS. They came to protest these companies. And in the end, after a lot of public and diplomatic pressure, Indian pharmaceutical companies were allowed to create generic drugs for HIV, which saved and extended millions of lives in these vulnerable countries. Now, the mentalities behind that have not changed. They got humiliated in public, so they relented that one time, but they're still doing it with everything else. And still they act like they were so generous that, in the end, we did the right thing. Yes, if the right thing is you chop off someone's arm at night, and then the next morning when the media is there to say, you give them a Band-Aid and say, buck up, you can do it.
That's a very novel way of putting it, Vibhuti Ji. I think you can support that statement.
No, the other part which is very important here is, and my message here is that we are, having dealt with that scenario for last as many years, India is a big market for anything and everything. And we are not taking advantage of that. So let's take an example of health wellness part of it. Actually, I had a conversation with a few doctors on this matter. And I said that, healthcare, oh, yes, I must share that with you. My friend in Nalanda International, the founder, Naveen Doshi, has started an integrated medical center in California in collaboration with Maharishi University Management, Maharishi Institute of Management, to study and analyze and bring synthesis between allopathic treatment and Ayurvedic treatment. We started that.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes,
that's great. Yes,
yes,
that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's what we did. And in September, in Iowa, Fairfield, there will be the major inauguration of that. But the process started. The issue here is very simple. Allopathic is what we define as is a crisis management. You go to the hospital because you have a serious problem. And homeopathic and the Ayurvedic is wellness plan. So if you're suffering from diarrhea, that's the last moment to begin a health plan. That's the time to take Imodium. So there is a definite merit in a coexistence of both treatment patterns. But we haven't ever marketed ourselves in that fashion. The whole West, the entire America is about wellness today. People from here go to India in swanky, pay top dollars to go to yoga ashram and things like that. They learn, come back, and they are ecstatic. And they go repeated visits. But have we created the infrastructure or culture of ourselves practicing prevention is better than cure? We don't. And that's the issue that I have with us Indians. Like charity begins at home. Let's start doing something about it at individual and community levels. हम आज सब मेडिटेशन शुरू करेंगे. अब तो साइंटिफिक एविडेंस भी है भाई. उसका साइंटिफिक एविडेंस डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ हेल्थ के पास, यूएस गवर्नमेंट के पास है. If you want, I will send it to you across to read it. How it has brought about perceptible change in reduction in cholesterol, stress, blood pressure, which in turn reduces heart attacks and strokes and things like that. So when we have these evidences in our cultural heritage, why aren't we using it? That's the point which I'm saying. Cancer hoga to surgery karni padegi. There is no point about that. Uski treatment karni padegi. But that's what is important to remember, that in any allopathic medication, you don't have a cure. If you are afflicted with diabetes, if you are taking whatever medication you are taking, you are supposed to take it for the rest of your life. Even if you take very powerful, you're supposed A1C levels, AC1 or whatever that the stuff is, it basically carries on maintaining it at that level. And that's what is important for us to figure out, that we can end imperialism, whether it was East India Company or media or pharmaceutical, provided that 1.3 billion people recognize that they are a big market and we can take a call on that.
Where is Ruchir gone?
Ruchir says he will be back.
Okay. No,
like
because
said, I'll be back. So
I was going to ask him the question, which I think is exactly up his street, because that is about this hoax about evidence-based medicine.
Oh, yeah.
And what is the evidence of evidence-based medicine? The basic fundamental of all modern medicine is trial. Okay? Okay, Ruchir, you're back. I just wanted to take you back. I think you might be following Taleb, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And he has a mouthful for all these protagonists of evidence-based medicine. And what he says that on what basis can you call it evidence-based when it is nothing but a statistical probability, based on probability? So it is statistical. It is not scientific. You can call it a statistical medicine. You cannot call it scientific medicine. Ruchir.
Was I muted? That's a very novel way of looking at it.
One sec. I'll interrupt you. I'll something that he wrote in 2018 in a tweet, and of course, his language is very colorful as always. What does he say? Okay, these are two tweets. He says in it is that famous book that is written. What is it called? Forgetting the name. It'll come back. Skin in the Game. Okay, Skin in the Game, where he has this it's called anti-fragile. It's that the pharma needs to medicate the mildly sick as these live long. And greater than 100 more mildly sick people than very sick, so more profitable to cure the healthy. Okay, then pharma reclassifies the sick to get clients. But relation HBP risk is non-linear. High blood pressure. Okay. Then second, even more colorful, he says, doctors are statistically naive and their statisticians are imbeciles. They have a hard time understanding non-linear dose response, so they binarize. And this is exactly, this binary response is my objection against the modern medicine. And I tell them that Ayurveda is far superior because it uses minimum 3-valued logic. And the 3-valued logic either in the doshas, Vat, Pitta, Kapha, or otherwise the human body, what is called the body, mind, and what is called man, buddhi, and chit, body, mind, intellect. So he says that is why they do not understand non-linear dose response, so they binarize. And pharma takes them for a ride by bucketing number mildly ill plus very ill, produces an illusion of risk for mildly ill.
That's very well summarized and in very colorful language, like you promised. I don't know what I can add to that.
That, of course, Talib is a classic in himself. So there's very little to add to his language and his. But he is very emphatic. He says there's nothing called evidence-based medicine because the evidence, what they call the evidence, is nothing but probabilizing. They are doing probability exercises on the basis of these trials. Or what are these trials? These trials are exercise not in bringing evidence, but not in bringing statistical evidence. And statistical evidence is not scientific evidence. I think you can enlighten me on this, both Ruchir and Vibhuti Ji. Is statistical evidence scientific evidence or probabilistic evidence?
Well, I know about statistics, lies, and statistics. That's one part. You can always swing the data one way or the other. However, as a famous investigator said, data. That's what I need to find the crime and who committed the crime. Data. That's another thing. But there are certain things which I always say.
I'll just add one thing.
Yeah.
Evidence-based medicine is almost exactly like evidence-based marketing. That you will understand.
So that's what I'm saying. Here is something very simple which happened in the Ayurvedic conversation that I said, is that what evidence-based information do you need that when you inhale oxygen and exhale CO2, you feel better, right? do you need to have an evidence for that? That is what is called pranayam. You live if you breathe. If you don't breathe, you die. What evidence do you need when somebody says stay calm? You stay calm. The real stage of calmness is when you have done a good meditation and good breathing exercise, then you achieve a state of calmness. That's what the meaning of being calm is. But all the yoga, all the practices, they vary individually from in one individual to another, because each one has an impact of a different kind depending on each one of our experiences. So you may be very satisfied with 15 minutes of exercise. For somebody, even 45 minutes is not enough, right? So that is what a question to be thrown. But you create a probability. That's why I gave the example that I love Ayurveda for one reason. I'm guaranteed no side effects. But if you take the medication advertisements that happen, and if you listen to the potential side effects of it, you will say, I'm happy with what I'm suffering from, instead of running the risk of getting into something else. That's what I want to say, is that it is the statistical probability. It is entirely, even surgery is a statistical probability. Successful hua ya nahi hua. That's what the science part is. Experiments done in these conditions, this can happen. It's always based on hundreds of conditions to be satisfied and met with. And that's my layman's term to that, is that, each three of us, and all the thousands of people who are viewing it, we have different effects of different medication, and our body reacts differently to the stimulus that comes to us. That's very simple. So you can't create a general condition, because you create a general condition of one Advil, and then you can get that after effect of that, or the side effect of that. So you have to begin to disclose that. And it's a very tricky thing. You can't have an absolute foolproof medication for everybody at the same time. You can't have that.
It's very simple, actually. Scientific method, the definition is very clear. And I think you don't need to go too far except to go to Karl Popper, who says that, okay, it is verifiability, universality, repeatability, and falsifiability.
Right.
And all four of these are missing in the evidence-based medicine.
Correct.
Now, if Ruchir has a take on this, then we move to the audience question.
Well, I have one other thing to share. If I could share my screen before we go to the audience questions,
Sure.
related to the original theme around vaccine imperialism. So I have 4 charts and graphics. Let me see if this works. Right. Do you see this?
Yeah.
So this is 2 days ago. The share of people who have received at least one dose of the COVID vaccine. And as you can see, there's a stark difference between the developed world or the global north or the west, however you want to term it, where about 1/3 to 1/2 of their populations have been vaccinated already. So Canada, the United States, the UK, Germany, France, Spain, Austria, Italy, Finland. The only outliers in the global south or the developing world, which are anywhere close to that, Chile with 50%, Mongolia, Bhutan, and 2 of the Gulf monarchies, I believe. So meanwhile, India is 11%. Japan, despite being advanced, an advanced economy, a high-tech society, only 5%. In Africa, the best performer is 3%, whereas there are some which have not been able to access the vaccine at all. some which are 0.02%, and some which are zero, statistically insignificant amounts, then this is the trajectory so far. That at the moment, the West is saying that by July, they'll have been able to vaccinate 70% of their population. By July, the rest of the world will maybe reach 5%. And the countries that I showed in Africa, which have not been able to access vaccines, might not even access them until next year, till 2020, till 2023. And where do the vaccines come from? This is a great graphical representation of production and export. So China has produced the most, it's exported about 1/3, a little over 1/3, and the rest has been for domestic consumption. The EU...
Nobody wants their medicine. Nobody wants their
it
vaccine.
was part of vaccine diplomacy. So let's say given away rather than export. Then the EU and the US have had similar levels of production. The EU has actually exported some. The US has exported zero. Despite all the drama about, oh, we're going to help our friends and our strategic partners, they are yet to release any for export out of their country and are still sitting on their stockpiles. Even India, despite the challenges that it's faced, has managed to export more through its vaccine diplomacy, despite having produced fewer than the US. And all this while, the US first blocked the TRIPS waiver at the WTO. Then they blocked the export of raw materials needed by other countries to produce vaccines in their factories, using a Defense Procurement Act as an emergency measure. And now, after a lot of pressure, they've changed their stance on the WTO, and they're saying, yes, we're in favor of the waiver. But their client states in the EU are now being the bad guys who are saying, no, we don't agree. And that's my final chart, that this is how countries are voting on waiving patent protection for COVID-19 vaccines. This is a proposal that was brought forward by South Africa and India, and has been blocked by the developed world, plus Japan and Brazil, which in many ways act as the extensions of the West in foreign policy anyway. So it doesn't matter that Biden changed the US's stance when his buddies in NATO and the EU are still doing the dirty work for them and blocking this.
Right. Absolutely right. Actually, you summed it up quite well. The exact response.
2 of 100 was going to United States, South America, and other things. But here is another interesting data, and that is that if the world wants to vaccinate 75% of the people, it will take 19 months for 1 or 2 vaccinations to happen. If 18.5 million shots are given every day. This is the extent of the pandemic. This is the extent of the machination that has gone on in this whole thing. So you are looking at many CEOs of pharmaceutical companies have already locked up. Their net worth has gone up significantly high because of stock prices and stock options. Watch MI2, then you will know what I'm talking about. This is, for me, this is playing out minus the thrills and the motorcycle chase and everything else. But the movie as a theme is playing out exactly that way. So, yeah, I'm totally shocked by that. The relevance to the whole thing. And you talked about Africa. There was a brilliant movie, Oscar winner movie, in which they talked about this exactly what you said, Ruchir, that the British pharma companies were telling that these guys don't know how to take medication. We have to teach them even how to take the medication.
Yeah, Fire in the Blood, I think, was the name of the film.
Which one? What is it?
Fire in the Blood.
No, this is another one.
Okay.
I'll send you the name there. Yeah. I'm forgetting the name, but this is exactly what it is. Anyway.
Okay, on that note, On that general note of agreement among all of us, we move to the audience questions. And before that, I have to request my audience to please share the video, like it, subscribe the channel, press the bell icon, and of course, support us with your generous contributions, which you have been doing anyway. And let's Patram Pushpam, as we call. Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yo me Bhaktya Prayachati Tadaham Bhakti Uprahatam Ashnami Prayatatmanaha. Jai Shri Krishna. Move to the questions.
Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Okay, so let's have the questions. Dr. Sharma, I as a group of private doctors don't represent all modern medicine doctors, especially not government doctors who fight all threats head on. It pained when someone made mockery of death of doctors. That's my last comment on the issue. Anyway, we are not on that. That was discussed in the last Ramadev episode. And I explained it to you there, and I'm not repeating it. Next. Reena Sukhdev, Jai Shri Krishna. In wellness industry in South Africa, there's a healthy relationship between allopathic and alternative practitioners. Ayurvedic herbs are very popular. It's very nice to hear that.
Good to know that.
Very interesting. Good to know. Next. Prashant Vish, why is WHO delaying approval for Covaxin? Are they doing so under pressure from China and Pfizer? Any idea, Vibhuti Ji or Ruchir?
Your guess is as good as mine, but you are seeing imperialism play a role here. Definitely, we know that WHO was playing hooky on behalf of China. So, and Chinese medication doesn't have that kind of an effectiveness, whereas Indian medicines had higher percentage of effectiveness. So, if WHO approves that, there's a clear case of imperialism playing a role here against India. And whether we give to anybody else or not, let Indians begin to embrace what is theirs.
Next. Thakur Rohit Jairaj Singh. What if BJP government put penalty on Ramdev Baba? All allopathic doctors are now totally against Ramdev Baba. Put penalty under what law? I don't know a law under which he can be penalized. And not all allopathic doctors. This is of some loonies in the IMA who have simply made a mountain out of a molehill. Taken a remark out of context, a private remark that too, it wasn't even public. And it has absolutely no bearing on the situation. Next. Dr. Sharma, Vibhuti, please study about health and wellness centers, part of Ayushman Bharat. It is all about prevention and combining traditional and modern pathy.
I will read it. Definitely read it. Yep.
Okay, next. प्रणिपात महानुभावो, धन्यवाद समर्थ जी.
बहुत दिनों के बाद प्रणिपात का शब्द को देखा मैंने पहली बार. Thank you, Samarth ji. Thank you.
Next, Reena Sukhdev, Jai Shri Krishna. If anyone takes the time to study allopathic evidence-based medicine, you will lift the dark world of animal cruelty and omission of side effects. Yes, that's why I quoted Talib.
Right.
No, nobody can describe it more graphically. Siddharth Ravikumar, a recent Gaumutra cow dung hit jobs by international press and US public health officials aimed at counteracting the rising profile of Indian vaccine and medicines. These guys, these Americans, damned fellows, they are filing patents on Gaumutra.
Right.
And which are actually being opposed by Indian Ayush Ministry through what we have, the Technical Knowledge Digital Library. I know this personally because I was involved in one of these. So what are you talking? These hit jobs? These guys are just doing these hit jobs out of sheer, I would say, fear of being swamped by the wellness industry.
And it's a classic tactic that they've used, that they want the East to give up its traditional knowledge so that they can monetize it by commercializing it and patenting it and building, intellectual property rights on it themselves. So if you can convince through your soft power, through your propaganda, through your narratives, people in the East to give up their backward, regressive ways, then they won't fight you when you make money off it. Same as in the past.
Yes. But that they are deeply aggrieved by this Indian government's patent protection through what the Ayush Ministry, you can have a look at this. It is called TKDL, Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. And one of its jobs is to contest any patents being taken on Indian traditions.
But that
like
also
haldi, neem, all these things they were taking. And now all patent offices in the West particularly, whenever they get this kind of a patent, they immediately refer it to TKDL. Now its opinion is considered to be definitive. So that is what we have achieved, and that's what they don't like.
Yes. And for the long,
you
go ahead.
mentioned about tamarind, haldi, haldi, lasan. There are so many advantages. These people are using that. There is a haldi ka English mein kya bolte hain?
Turmeric.
Turmeric. The turmeric tablets being sold. They are advertising on television the benefits of turmeric. And then somebody told me, he was selling that bottle for $30, turmeric bottle. So I said, I'm an Indian. You don't need this. Because your food contains turmeric as it is. So there was an instant recognition. But that's where it made me angry. That ये हमारा turmeric का के गुणों को लेकर के टैबलेट बना के $30 की बेचते हैं as a golden element, golden cure for all your problems. और हम जो है ऐसे करके डाल देते हैं खाने में and we take it for granted. That's the point. Like, for example, गौमूत्र की जहां तक सब की बात है. So you remember I told the virtue of cow and how the cash cow concept came here. Gaumutra is one thing, is that we must do research on that to find the elements of it and then control it. Why not? I mean, I know one thing for sure, I know, every Indian knows that cow dung doesn't have a foul odor and serves a remarkable biodegradable purpose. Why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we doing some instead of being mocked at and laughed at? That's what angers me.
And it fits into a broader pattern as well, that it's not just these hit jobs. For 12 months in the run-up to the second wave in India, there was this questioning tone in the Western media that we have it so bad in Italy or in the US, and people are dying by the thousands, 5,000 per day, which was the record in the US. The case rate per capita was immense. The death rate was immense. And during this, because the Western media is designed to soothe the feelings of its target audience, they would ask, why is this happening to us while these Africans and Latin Americans and Asians, why aren't they dying like flies? Why aren't South Africans and Indians dying like flies? That's their destiny, not ours. They live in filth. They deserve to get the worst.
Yes.
And so they waited. They had these articles written in advance, waiting for the moment to come, and they were getting frustrated that it wasn't coming. When it finally came, they had been preparing for it for months. They were swooping down on crematoria to capture these graphic scenes of bodies being burned. They went out of their way to find, a few people who were using cow dung, for example, as a nature-based therapy and extrapolated it into, oh, this is Indian culture, and they're getting sick because of this. They're getting black fungus disease because of this. And then there were plenty of people, once that seed had been planted into people's minds, this was always their expectation that, oh, finally, yes, now the Indians are dying like flies,
But
and now
they're
we
very
can.
disappointed that it lasted less than a month.
Yes, and
Not
even
only
now,
that,
it's only 10% of the case rate and death rate that Italy or the US experienced at their peaks. But they made it graphic. They sold a narrative in a way that was very appealing to people who see us as less than human, who see us as worthy of filth and death. And once their minds were primed for that, it was very easy. The soil was fertilized and the seed was planted.
and the statistical part is so important. Even
So,
till date, India has 280,000 less deaths than the United States.
Despite the population being 4 times as much.
Exactly. This is what the people of India must remember, that this particular second phase in India, hitting youngsters as well, even in people in the 40s, I don't call it an accident. It is partly to do with the farmer agitation that led to the spread, partly led to varieties of factors. So we have to become careful about that part very seriously.
okay, so just as we were discussing, I just have something flashing on my screen. It says that complaint filed against Indian Medical Association President John Rose Austin Jailal for abusing his position and engaging in proselytization.
Great, brilliant.
Hallelujah.
I hope we were the inspiration. Let's take the pleasure.
And yes, I must tell all my viewers, if anyone of you knows Baba Ramdev, please advise him to hire someone articulate and confident to defend him. He doesn't have one as of now. I guess I can advise that to the Ayush Ministry as well. Dr. Sharma, dear sir, drug development is more complicated. Years of research goes before even phase 1 studies approved by government. The stats come into play only phase 3. Okay, Dr. Saab. Let me tell you that I have worked in the medical sector in an administrative capacity, of course. So, and I quite know how the research is conducted. I had my hands full trying to conduct some of these trials. I know exactly how it is done. So please. Next. Abhishek Lal Sharan. We need to listen to those US historians who predicted this pandemic in 1950 to 2000 time frame, namely guys like Manly P. Hall, who also says vaccines will kill 50% of human race. No one investigating this. I mean, you're talking about that. I think this Nobel laureate, this what's his name, Ruch Montagnier. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. He is saying exactly this. He says that this is disastrous. Why are you administering vaccine during a pandemic? Well, he's a Nobel Prize winner. But the pharma industry is not taking him seriously.
Right.
And I think the entire medicine or the pharma industry and their clients, that is the medical profession, they seem to be simply in the reactive mode.
Although it's difficult to say that vaccines will kill 50% of the human race. There's other ways that will happen through thermonuclear annihilation, and that the probability of that was much higher during the 1950s to 2000s, and remains higher. So it's not vaccines that will kill us all. It's certain countries which have access to weapons that can wipe us all out, and we're sleepwalking into disaster on that front.
Okay.
One of the problems with this medication vaccination is that These are not fully approved. These are emergency use purposes only. So we do not know what will happen taking the vaccine. And that's the reason why so many people are opposed to taking the vaccine. Probably that's the whole reason that the other gentleman made a mention about. Thank you.
Next. Sharat Chandra, Jai Shri Krishna, as simple as BP reading can't be common for all. It's very generalized as 120 by 80. Different people can have different reading, yet be normal. Absolutely.
Thank you. Absolutely correct, Sharat. Absolutely. Thank you.
That's
You
what
made
Ayurveda
it
does.
normal.
I don't know. This tribe of Nadi Vaidya seem to be disappearing. But if you can get hold of a good Nadi Vaidya, I can tell you that 90% of your problems are taken care of well before even they start.
Can I share something with you, Sanjay ji, about this? The Transcendental meditation movement here, there are authentic Vaidyas. Vaidya India se bulate hain yahan pe. And they hold the camp here. They charge $200 or whatever to defray their cost of travel and everything else. They spend days and weeks here. And you have no idea how many Americans go for the pulse reading. That's the time, just as the concept of cash cow, they begin to understand the meaning of, do you have your finger on the pulse of the thing? Because I have seen the Vaidyas reading the pulse and narrating the whole physical story of that man or a woman. It has happened in front of me, including myself.
I have actually researched into it, because once I got this crazy idea of creating some kind of a instrument that can do Nadi reading. But later on, I realized that it is not really related to just intellect. It requires higher spiritual powers as well. That is the time I gave it up. Next. It's a global fact that Bharat is only producer of global cancer and diabetic medicines and US is largest consumer. Still, Bharat fails to do hard bargain. Any of the two gentlemen can take this.
Well, the difference between the industry government relationship in the US or the wider Western world and that in India is that in the US or in the West, in the interests of industries and the government are one and the same. They completely overlap. There's complete policy consensus, whether it's the left-wing government or right-wing government, no matter which party, which prime minister, which president is in power over there, they understand what is expected of them in promoting their indigenous industry, protecting it, and engaging in mercantilist, or you can call it, imperialist, neo-imperialist, neo-colonialist policies. Because it's clear to them that that's in their benefit, and the parties engage in not the parties, the companies engage in legalized corruption, which is lobbying. These countries don't have any corruption because it's legal. Now it's once you make it transparent, it's no longer corruption. But they do pay for access. They do pay to seed their policy objectives and their narratives into the minds and papers of government machinery. And that is still missing in India, where the interests of our industries sometimes overlap with that of the government, but sometimes overlap with that of foreign governments, which again control the headquarters of these industries. And we just have the branches, or we just have a fully owned subsidiary. Pharma is a little bit different because India has a strong domestic pharmaceutical sector, but what we don't have is a state that projects that power on behalf of the pharma industry in the same way that the West can, because the West has perfected this over the past 70 years, and we're barely starting to understand the rules of the game, let alone starting to play it.
And India hasn't even started playing that game, because the moment any prime minister gets up and defends its own pharma industry, there will be a Rahul Gandhi who will get up and say that the prime minister is defending his friends, capitalist friends.
Which is what happens in a normal country. Obviously, you will defend your own country's industries. if you're a semi-colony, which is not allowed to have sovereignty, which is not allowed to have independent jurisdiction on its own territory and has to wait for permission from abroad, then yes, that's what we are. Or that's what certain parties want to make us become.
Exactly. Next. Poonam, Big Pharma and IMA have learned it from us. They're crying that Patanjali ke aane se maro munafo mein gato ho gaya. These guys are scams. I mean, look at that guy. That's the vice president is one Daya, who was calling the prime minister a super spreader. Then the Jailal, of course, the president, he's a scandal himself. And then we had this secretary Lele, who cannot speak in a gentlemanly fashion. He can speak only in profanities. So that sums up the kind of association. This is an association of only, I would say, doesn't even represent the 10% of medical profession. And when the health minister gives them disproportionate response, there's so many other associations among even the private practitioners. What's so big about IMA? Give them a kick on the butt. Dr. Harshvardhan, don't go cowering before them. Even Dr. Harshvardhan needs somebody aggressive to champion his causes. I think I'm kind of promoting myself. Next.
And wasn't the head of the IMA the chap who said that by Jesus' grace we've defeated Corona?
Exactly.
And that this was a wonderful opportunity to spread the love of Christ.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. Thank you for letting me know.
They all do that. No? Even Mother Teresa used to love people in misery.
Right.
Why doesn't Bharat looking up to African continent or Central Asia to help people there with our medicines? We can dethrone any other pharma market of the West. We don't have sufficient number of vaccines.
Well, with vaccines, no, but with our medicines, yes. In Africa, Indian generic medicines are what filled in the gap when Western pharma companies refused to sell to people in Botswana or South Africa, and that also explains why the current proposal at the World Trade Organization was co-sponsored by India and South Africa, who launched it, and is supported by the vast majority of African countries. So in many cases, Africa is an afterthought to Western companies when it comes to anything with a profit motive. They only think of it as a security issue or as a continuation of their old colonial relationship. So France has a very deep relationship with Western Africa, the UK with Eastern Africa, wherein they install a leader who's very friendly with the establishment in London or Paris, and they ensure that the narrative is managed around them. And meanwhile, that leader ensures that the country remains a source of raw materials, a source of cheap labor and immigrants, so cheap doctors. So some countries, their biggest export is doctors to the British NHS, for example, and remain a market for finished goods and services once they've been value added in the colonial metropole in continental France or the UK. And their interest is to uphold what worked so well for them for hundreds of years, but with a more gentle human face. And that's what's called neocolonialism.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. That, for example, what the point which I was going to make is that I missed it. I'll when I get back, I'll come back to that. Sorry.
But France and UK.
Somebody just made a remark that I must share with everybody. Says that IMA is the Rakesh Tikat of doctors.
Yes.
Okay. Siddharth Shekhar, if any of you three have chest pain, would you go to a Nadi where they know insults, only honest answers? You're talking like crazy, Siddharth. You were there, present in our earlier episode. We said very clearly, and even in this episode, we said very clearly that allopathic is crisis. When you're in a crisis, then you go to allopathy. Allopathy is not for prevention. It is not for even normal medicine. And both of them have to complement each other. No use getting into this binary, either this or that. All the while, I've been saying that we do not believe in binaries because Indian system does not believe in binaries. Indian system is always three valued or more. So please try and understand that point. This is not the kind of question we expect from what is called enlightened listeners. Ramdev Baba, Muktavati is most efficient for blood pressure. It keeps my blood pressure low for a few days, even if I do not take it. Okay? That's an empirical evidence.
That's right.
That's an empirical evidence.
It works in his case, which is perfect for him.
Dr. Sharma, please don't mind. Akela phas gaya aaj. Where is Dr. Deepak Guru, Vibhuti Ji? 4-5 lakh health and wellness centers already established under Ayushman Bharat. भाई कौन मना कर रहा है? विभूति जी तो मान लिया ना आपकी बात. आप क्या प्रूव करना चाहते हो? आप बिल्कुल अकेले नहीं हो. विभूति जी आपके साथ है.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Next. Please comment on IMA approving wall paints, toothpaste, cooking oil, and so on. I'm बताता हूँ आपको. I have a list. Let me find out the list.
That's a wonderful way to make money.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I would say only one thing. If IMA approves, don't take it. Tell them I'm not taking it because IMA approved it.
No, I'll tell you what.
They will get disincentivized immediately.
Close up toothpaste. Odomos cream. Royal Health Shield Asian Paints ka. Health Shield paint. Can you imagine? Bigger fraud.
Yeah.
Then Dettol hand wash. Then Kent RO. And the best is, of course, Crompton LED bulb.
Oh, really? Oh, my God.
So what are the health benefits of a LED bulb? I'm very curious.
I think if we have any good Samaritan and you have some legal practice, these people should be prosecuted for all this. This is nothing but fraud and cheating.
They'll say that this was only their opinion and not scientific or medical fact and should not be taken as such.
They're not supposed to make that. They're a professional
and that's why
body.
they keep saying that, oh, we're a society registered under the Societies Act and we've just issued an opinion. That's how they
cannot do that. They cannot do that. They've taken money for this. Why they've taken money for this? Because the income tax is flagged in one of their returns. I think 2009-10 returns. I've seen that. So this is nothing but fraud, cheating. I think it is covered under 419420. Let me put my lawyer's hat on. My concern for Africa just came out of emotions because they're highly exploited humans and we were Gondwana continent once. Thank you, Rishiji. We all share your concern.
We have much in common with the colonial experience as well, and much to learn from each other in various ways to defeat colonialism, defeat neo-colonialism, and embrace our own heritage, our own knowledge systems, and build a country in our own image and not in the cage that the colonizer left for us.
Next. Krishna Sundar Ruchir, what's your comment on FB whistleblowers leaking internal documents detailing about censoring comments, likes, posts relating to vaccine concerns?
Well, this is what happens when you stop being a social media platform and you become a news portal and a news aggregator. And people don't use Facebook the way they did 10 years ago to connect with each other. They use it to share links and share videos. Very few of these links are made organically. Nobody's sharing their thoughts anymore. They're sharing pre-manufactured links. That can be from clickbait farms. It can be fake news. It can be, mainstream news, which half the time is fake anyway, or at least pre-manufactured towards certain narratives. And then people give their opinions in the comments, and they've been exposed to all sorts of messages. They internalize it, and then maybe some well-intentioned people at the at the high up level in Facebook think, oh no, what have we done? People are sharing the wrong kind of news, sharing the wrong kind of message. We'll get in trouble for this. Now we need to moderate it and censor these comments, which it's within the terms and conditions. Once you say yes to it, once you open an account, it's technically their internal policy. But this is the risk when you become the kind of portal that they've become today. Then it opens up a new can of worms, and then they feel the need to cover themselves to show that they were not the ones promoting anti-vax or vaccine hesitancy, so that they are not seen as liable. So it's self-interest, like with all companies, like with most countries.
Next. I mentioned that.
And underneath, Corona ending due to Jesus. I am a president. Very good.
His license should be suspended immediately.
I wonder, why Jesus's power only worked in this country and not in the Vatican or in Italy when they were facing the brunt of it for so long.
Oh, they are not honest enough to Jesus. They become hypocrites. You see. Siddharth Ravi Kumar, question for Ruchir. How did the Chinese achieve their non-apologetic assertion of TCM with a communist regime in place, while Indian government is still too afraid to bless products like Ayurkoro 3 that have been tested in actual trials?
So TCM meaning traditional Chinese medicine.
That's right.
Well, it's not despite having a communist regime in place. So something that we don't always realize because of the specific nature of Indian communists is that in the rest of the world, be it in China or in Vietnam or in Cuba, the communists were anti-colonial nationalists who first achieved national liberation and achieved self-respect for the culture and civilization that they represented, and then built communism. Whereas Indian communists believe in degrading Indian culture, and they don't even have a vision to create any real practical socialism within the country. For decades, it's been an open secret that these parties have an extraterritorial loyalty, and they are basically the unofficial embassies of the former Communist Party of Great Britain, former Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and the current Communist Party of China. This was well known, and this is why actual Indian socialists like Jayaprakash Narayan or Ram Manohar Lohia or Acharya Narendra Dev used to say so, that these communists don't actually even believe in communism. They're just managers who've been sent to supervise the Indian system and bide their time and make it more amenable to their masters. And this goes back to the foundation of Indian communism, that Indian Communist parties were not founded in India. The CPI was founded in Tashkent, in the Soviet Union, by M.N. Roy, who first founded the Communist Party of Mexico and was then sent to create the Indian one. So it's not organic, it's not grassroots. It wasn't part of the national liberation either, because Comintern, as it was called, the Communist International, that supervised communist parties from Moscow around the world, believed that India was not ready for communism. And their biggest expert on India was Rajni Palme Dutt, who was a half Swedish, half Indian professor in London, part of the Communist Party of Great Britain. And they said that since India is a British colony anyway, the CPI should be mentored by the CPGB, by the Communist Party of Great Britain. But the Communist Party of Great Britain was not interested in national liberation. It wanted to create a welfare state or a socialist state in the UK based on the blood and sweat and tears and toil of Indians. So, as a result, it's us, as a country that have the strange communists. In the rest of the world, Chinese communists are Chinese patriots. Vietnamese communists are Vietnamese patriots. Cuban communists are Cuban patriots, and they love and promote their culture with the power of the state. Indian communists are also Chinese patriots, which is the great tragedy.
And what about Indian, what is called Congress Party members?
Well, there's a great article if you look it up. I think called the Moscow Papers. It seemed like the whole country was for sale. That in the 60s and 70s, both the KGB and CIA had very large delegations in the Soviet embassy and the US embassy in Delhi. And they basically had a bidding war to see how many journalists, bureaucrats, and Congress Party members they could cultivate. And it was very easy. They would send suitcases full of money to Congress Party headquarters, and they got upset because they didn't even return the suitcases empty. They kept the suitcase each time, and the embassy had to order more and more. And once the bidding war stopped, there was no more Soviet Union. There were many other countries that they could continue this wonderful relationship with. Take money and turn India into a client state that can be for the Russians, for the Vatican, for the Chinese, for the Americans, for the British. It's a free-for-all.
That's exactly which, if you remember, I had mentioned that during my master's study at Gokhale Institute, the Far Eastern Economic Review had talked about that India is a happy hunting ground. That's where I picked up the phrase. It's a happy hunting ground for anyone. Yes.
Okay, next. Krishna says that in terms of consumer product safety, total recall of product from marketplace occurs when there are about 10 to 20 incidents of products like tires, car seats, grips, etc. CDC reports 4,000 plus deaths after taking the vaccine. Your view, sir? Vibhuti Ji.
Look, if there is an undue death that is happening, like the after effects are horrible, you have to take preventive care from that point of view. But the number of lives that it is saving is also an important one. So I can't say anything about it, what is the number, absolute numbers. So in with 281,000 deaths in India, there is a panic around the world. Everybody is preaching to India. But 581,000 deaths in the US, first wave in the US also killed 4,000, 5,000 people a day. So the people forget that part of it. So it almost looks like a geopolitical gameplay of blaming India for its inefficiencies or lack of structure or infrastructure and make India look bad. And then you have 12 celebrated leaders of Maha Ghanta Bandhan, as I call them, writing letters on farmers' agitation they are going to restart. ये सबका विश्वास कभी नहीं होने वाला है इंडिया में. I think, in my opinion, Modi ji should do the GPS refitting and introduce the GPS system. सबका विकास, सबका साथ, सबका विकास ठीक है, सबका विश्वास delete कर दो उसको and reroute back to the सबका साथ, सबका विकास. Because सबका विश्वास होने वाला है भी नहीं, कभी होता भी नहीं है.
And just to add to your knowledge, all our esteemed viewers, IMA also endorses Tropicana Premium Juice.
Now I'm going to tell Tropicana here, use the IMA endorsement to market here. This is such a shame.
Next. Abhishek, I've been taking Coronel for 1 year and I noticed that my diabetes disappeared also. I have not caught cold for last 12 months and no stomach upset.
Oh, wow.
Another empirical evidence. I think we need to collect these empirical evidence, document them. Right? I don't know whether they are doing it or not. Ekalav Singh, lot of leftist and liberal aunties abusing Baba Ramdev, themselves consuming Ayur Slim to keep their weight under control. I personally know some. Wow, you are a treasure trove of knowledge. Please do share this secret knowledge with us.
We should learn from them. There's no shame in using the tools of your enemy to further your own goal. Everyone should do that.
Yes.
Next, Gaurav Chamani, dear sir, please don't have a unilateral biased panel. Why not call someone from allopathy? I did. So please watch my talk where Dr. Shiva Shastri was present with Sanjay Vibhuti sir moderating. Let us have Shankaracharya versus Madhvacharya debate. Please don't have echo chambers. Gauravji, you're actually not being fair to us. You had these debates earlier, and I told you I had a panel in which I had Dr. Shiva Shastri, who was a noted surgeon. He was present in that debate. And we had Rakesh Mittal of the Patanjali Group, Swabhimani Sangathan.
In addition, if I may add to him, is that we are not echo chambers. We are expressing our thoughts and opinions. And right in the beginning, I had said that it appears that allopathic is more of a crisis management and Ayurveda is towards wellness and health management. So you apply the tools which are when available. It's something like this, that if your body is aligned, doesn't mean you will not have heart attack. Even though you are doing all the preventive things, you will have a problem which is age-related, diet-related, issues-related. So if you have a crisis, go to the allopathic. I'm not against allopathy. We are talking about the pharmaceutical imperialism. When they see, interesting part, Ayurveda doesn't say allopathic is bad. Allopathic does say Ayurveda is bad. This is the issue that is important. And that's the reason why we have established the Integrated Center of Medical Research, where we will establish that how both can coexist mutually happy. And they both have the utility to in that regard. And we have seen empirical evidence here, where people have taken Covaxil, their other ailments have gone. And there are many things. For example, there was a guy here, he had COVID, almost dying, but he took Giloy. I didn't mention that before. He took Giloy and he survived on that. He gave me two containers of that, with 30 tablets each. He said, if in case you get hit before you take the vaccine, at least have it ready in your house. He distributed it. He imported it and distributed it to many, many, many people in this part of the world. Yes.
And if I could add, the wider issue here is about preventative medicine, which is not talked about enough. And it can take many forms. Ayurveda is one form of preventative medicine. Another form is policy changes, that certain diseases and certain conditions and risk conditions have gone up in the last few decades because of certain policies or certain industries pushing their interests. So, for example, in the Western world, if you wanted to improve people's life expectancy, decrease their morbidity, and reduce their likelihood of going to a hospital with a heart attack or needing to be on heart medicine for a long time or developing diabetes, the best way to do that would be to end government subsidies for meat production. It would be to create better cities that allow for pedestrian movement instead of putting people in SUVs and driving from the suburbs to the city and back every day for 2 hours. It would be to control the marketing of sugar-intensive junk food, such as candy and fizzy drinks. But no government has the courage to do that because these are big lobbyists, these are big employers, these are big revenue creators for these countries. So instead, they go for band-aid solutions, which is, when you go to a hospital, you'll get, a slightly cheaper insurance for that. But that's not a systemic approach to improving health. That's simply curing people once they get sick. An effective health system prevents people from getting sick in the first place through giving them a good environment, guaranteeing them access to good food, clean water, clean air, and preventing lifestyle diseases, or in the case of certain cancers, preventing their exposure to carcinogens. If you double the taxes on tobacco products, lung cancer goes down. That's a proven policy. But no government wants to give up the juicy revenues that it gets from tobacco taxes and the employment that it generates.
Quite right. Next question. Turmeric latte. Oh,
Right.
wonderful.
It is there. It is there.
Okay, turmeric
Because once
latte.
you call it turmeric latte instead of haldi doodh, then at Starbucks you can charge 400 rupees for it, probably. Make a big margin.
नेक्स्ट गिरीश बिलोरे सर, मेरा व्यक्तिगत अनुभव है कि मुझे प्रॉब्लम रहता था 2010 से हर वर्ष रुपए 60,000 से 1 लाख रुपए तक खर्च होता था। 2019 तक ऐसा होता रहा। पिछले लॉकडाउन के दौरान कोविड-19 रामदेव जी के वैद्य से सुसारी तुलसी वटी आदि का नियमित प्रयोग किया। आज तक कफ जन्य रोगों से बचा हुआ हूँ तथा कोरोनिल के नियमित प्रयोग से अब तक स्वस्थ हूँ। ईश्वर के दया से कोविड-19 मेरे परिवार के किसी भी सदस्य को नहीं हुआ है। वेरी गुड, अनदर एम्पिरिकल एविडेंस। नेक्स्ट आतिश कुमार पानिक रही, वेस्ट इज फॉलोइंग इंडियन कल्चर, स्टिल आवर पीपल क्वेश्चन आवर आयुर्वेदिक कल्चर। वी आर द क्लासिक व्हाट इज कॉल्ड द colonialized minds. That's what Ruchir is saying all the time.
Self-orientalism, that we internalized all the criticism that the West gave of our culture. They might even have abandoned it, but we keep it alive. That yes, we're not democratic enough, we're not secular enough, we're not Christian enough, we're not Western enough. And we think that this is true because 200 years ago, someone told us this to justify their foreign rule. We don't question it, we're discouraged from questioning it. And the entire social incentive system, academic incentive system of post-independence India rewards you for thinking like
That's
that.
right.
If you act like that, you'll become a brown sahib.
Correct.
And you'll get to enjoy life insulated from the poor.
Next. Please invite Dr. B.M. Hegde, an allopathic doctor, to discuss the alternate medicine, and he is excellent. Do let us have his contact, please. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this terrific discussion. We went on for nearly 1 hour and 42 minutes, and this is our initiative that is bearing fruit and is quite exciting. I just got the first 25 pages of the Fatawa Alamgiri translation, and it's terrific. Good. The way it describes how to treat your sex slave. Oh, wonderful. I'm enlightened.
Well, this is why the great Emperor Aurangzeb invited 500 scholars from Baghdad and from Mecca to his capital.
Yes. And Central Asia as well. How could he forget?
From Bukhara, and Khiva, the greatest slave markets of Central Asia.
And I'm very glad that once it was 64, and in a very short time we have hit 91% of the goal. That's great.
I am really enjoying it. The first 25 pages that I read, it was breathtaking. I think it's been worth the trouble.
Good. Very good.
So, thank you very much, Ruchir and Vibhuti Ji.
Thank you.
Thank you, all viewers. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Jai Hind,
Vande Mataram.
Absolutely.